Afternoon to everybody joining us. Hope you're all keeping well and warm. We're going to kick off the webinar in about a minute or two to just allow some time for some people to join in. So grab your cup of coffee and we'll see you in a minute. All right, I am going to kick off. So a very good afternoon to everybody who's joined us. Thank you all for the next hour of your time. We are so grateful for it. I'm joined today by the special Radi to tell you a little bit more about load shedding and how it's impacting our mental health. In today's society, the word load shedding or even electricity, I'm sure sends shivers down a lot of people's minds, a lot of people's backs. So with the millionth stage of load shedding, Roddy is going to take us through how it's impacting our mental health, how it's deregulating our regulation systems because of the uncertainties of it, the lack of control in it. So I'm looking very forward to hearing a little bit more about it. For those of you who don't know Radi, Radi is a passionate people engagement professional. She owns her own training and consultancy business. She's a mentor and academic tutor for MBA students at a local business school in Johannesburg. She's president of the YAPA South African board and has been working in the industry for over 16 years. She also recently contributed to a book on medical health in workplace, mental health in the workplace with knowledge and resources. So looking very forward to Radi's opinion on the topic. So sit back, relax, and over to you, Radi.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the invite, Daniela. And I can't see anyone, but I'm told that Daniela would field all the questions for me. So I'm very happy to be with the crowd, even though it's virtual, and hoping that we'd have some lovely ideas from you as well. But yeah, load shedding, hey? It's quite topical at the moment. So I want to give us at least 2 minutes to vent. What's the biggest pain point when it comes to load shedding with you? So use the chat box. Like I said, Daniela will shout it out to me. And let's hear from you a little bit. Let's give ourselves this 2 minutes to vent. Load shedding, what comes up for you? Let's hear. Daniela, you will shout it out for me.
I will. Waiting for these to come through. I think if we can, while we wait, Roddy, for me, it's the inconvenience of the times when you actually need electricity, when you get home and needing to make supper. It's super inconvenient to not be able to make dinner if there's no power, for those of us without gas stoves. In the chat box, we're getting some returns here. The rush to cook before the power goes off. There you have it.
Similar, yeah. Similar.
Increasing cost of electricity, but not getting the full service. Jeez, that's quite a pain point, I'd say.
Yes,
Internet connection. Yeah, connection again. Crime when it's dark. Wow.
That's one of the concerns. Yes, definitely.
Money on solar.
Yes, the extra, yeah, you're going to have to dig deeper to get you. So you pay for electricity, but you're also getting other devices to help you.
Yeah. Someone else, another person saying crime.
Yeah.
Traffic. Oh my gosh, traffic. That's another trigger for me. Oh.
Yeah. Lights
rush,
being out. Plan around that.
Rush to getting things done, causing more stress. Yeah, so it seems like time, money, inconvenience, extra expense, lack of accountability.
Yeah. Definitely. Thank you so much. So yeah, we mentioned it brings uncertainty. You can't plan around those things. It takes us out of our comfort zone, but also just the impact on our daily functioning is what's coming up quite often. And obviously with that, some emotions that go with it. So we can go from frustrated to angry. Sometimes if we can push it to the positive, you can just laugh about it. And use the time a little bit more effectively, and we'll talk about those kind of things. But I think the most important thing is that it really takes us out of our comfort zone and out of our normal routine, and anything uncomfortable for us or uncertain puts us a little bit off kilter as human beings. So let's look at why a bit later, and I want to talk about how it affects our brains. But if you're looking at affecting our productive lives, we mentioned internet access earlier, but all of that also affects staff morale, because people are like, oh, I really can't cope with this on and off. Even though you plan, you have a loss of planning because some of the schedules are not according to plan. You're unable to trade sometimes, damaging equipment, traffic, as we mentioned earlier, and security came up quite often. So when we're actually looking at that, we are looking at stress from a different perspective. Firstly, from a safety, basic needs perspective, our physiological, we're going into winter now. If we're going to have load shedding, it's freezing. So not having heaters, not having security, because it'll be extra dark, those kind of things. Then there's also the psychological needs. And those of you that are familiar, this is actually according to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So it's impacting us on all different levels of our needs as a human being. And then ultimately self-fulfillment needs, you plan so much, you plan to study in some cases. I have lots of my students at Henley complaining about load shedding, the extra stress that it takes to actually complete an assignment, or exams are coming up. How are they going to manage? Because it's open book, but they give you a certain amount of time. And what if load shedding happens? So it just gives you that extra stress or push or pressure that impacts on us and flips it over our normal coping, because we just don't have control of it. For those of you that know what happens to your body in terms of stress, the usual short term is you're nervous, you're worried, you have some physiological stuff, your heart beats harder, or you have palpitations, your breathing quickens, all of those things. But on a long-term perspective, because these are happening consistently and over a long period of time, you might be seeing things like headaches, migraines, anxiety, from a mental health perspective. Like I said, our usual coping seemed to be fine, but these kind of issues that's prolonged pushes us just a little bit over. Again, problems consistently with palpitations, all of those things could lead to heart issues or trouble breathing, hyperventilating, panic attacks. It could affect your skin. I met somebody over the weekend that said her eczema is so bad because of the level of stress that she's under. And then also things around diabetes or fertility problems in some cases. So those are the physical stuff. Let's look at how it actually affects our brain. When we are actually in a trauma state, what happens to our brain is that we go into survival mode. And what happens with survival mode is that we actually stop processing things from the frontal cortex. We go into the very basic need of our brain of survival. So that's your hippocampus and your brainstem, which is looking at fight, flight, freeze, or just going along to cope kind of thing. So what happens then is that if we are in that state, we can't even think clearly. And when that becomes a more prolonged thing, it starts impacting on how we actually going to cope from a chemical level, so it puts you in a stress brain loop. It helps us to look at, it doesn't help us to look at where we're functioning, because actually you have decreased regulation of your cortisol. It increases your glucocorticoids, long words. And then also your cellular changes in your hippocampus starts changing and that then starts becoming a more permanent kind of loop in your brain, because you then can't have sleep, you have poor nutrition, you're not paying attention to the nutrition, and then also emotional distress. And that decreases your attention, perception, short-term memory, as well as learning and word finding. You can see I'm struggling with the word finding. So we're all kind of going through this in weird, different ways. So chronic stress basically has factors that impact on our health risks. Sometimes to cope with it, we go overeating, lack of inactivity, or physical inactivity, lack of activity. Also your stress or your substance abuse in that time. So even if it's not alcohol or whatever, but maybe you're popping a lot more pain pills and you just can't sleep. So sleep deprivation, because now you're having to compensate for working later hours or catching up with things, which just increases your levels of stress as well. So what happens then is your primary outcomes is it's affecting your cardiovascular, your metabolic system, as well as your immune system, as well as your brain. The secondary outcome can be the diseases, and your health consequences then is to look at serious stuff like physiology and pathology that's playing out in your body, premature aging. I've seen a couple of gray hairs earlier, cognitive decline, depression, anxiety, and those kind of things. So those are terrible circumstances, but with chronic stress, that is a reality. So with chronic stress comes the talk around burnout. And I just want us to be a little bit more aware of what burnout is. And burnout is a persistent negative work-related state of mind. And basically that's characterized by exhaustion, the stress, as well as a sense of reduced competence. And it shows as decreased motivation and the development of dysfunctional attitudes at work. So that's how it's showing up in the workplace. And I'm sure majority of you have realized that, I think it was 3 years ago now, because time has gone so fast, and COVID took away some of our time, that burnout actually became a reality in our DSM-5, where it's actually a diagnosable disease that doctors will actually quote. So let's look at some of the coping styles. We can either deal with it in an active way or a passive way. If we're dealing with it, we're going to need to look at changing the situation, tackling the problem, and looking at problem solving consistently. However, if we do it indirectly, we're also going to talk to others, get some distraction, or gather information on how we can do things better. But also there's the negative side, which is denying, avoiding, and suppressing. And some people are caught in that quadrant. Or substance use, wait and see, or resignation. As you can see, the active side is where we want to be it direct or indirect, because sometimes we need a both. But that's the coping styles we should be looking at. So what can we do? We can take control of what you can, because sometimes we can't control everything. Lots of it is out of our control. And when it's out of our control, let's look at how we look at it. How can we adapt in terms of the expectations of it? Plan for the unpredictable. So don't just plan, have a A, B, and C plan. Let's put it that way. Repurpose your time. So for example, what I've done with repurposing my time, I try and make meetings during face-to-face meetings, during the load shedding schedule that's in my area, so that I don't feel like my time online will be taken. Not always possible, but I try and repurpose my time in that. Or look at it from a personal perspective and repurpose family time around that, or other appointments. Usually things that's in your control is like readjusting your lunch or tea time kind of thing. Also avoid panic buying in terms of different devices and all of that, because that also creates the hole in the pocket, as somebody else said earlier. Try and research things, look at what's the best option for you. I fell in that category where I started buying all these devices to help me manage it, and some of the devices didn't actually work, so I wasted money. Also keep it light, because I think we put so much of pressure on ourselves that it increases where you are actually at, and it takes your pressure levels from here to maybe just over what you can actually deal with. So in usual terms, when we talk about becoming more resilient, this is something that we have to adapt to and bounce back with. So first of all, what we need to look at is accept the change. Unfortunately, we in Africa, this is what we're going to be dealing with. So we have to find more ways of dealing with it or being comfortable with this change. Become a continuous learner, so learn new skills on how to deal with it, understand what we're dealing with, and try and apply them in this time of change. Take charge of your own career or your own development. So maybe sometimes during the downtime, you can read an article or do something that feeds your soul. Find your sense of purpose. So get your compass right, and these little distractions is there, but it's not bigger than what you actually wanting to do with your life. So it helps you assess your setbacks within a framework that's broader, and you're a little bit more settled. Pay attention to your self-identity, form part what your identity is at work, and these kind of distractions like load shedding doesn't define who you are and how you perform. And then cultivate relationships, develop and nurture a broad network of personal and professional relationships that will help you, support you, but also maybe become a resource in times like this when you can't really deliver, or this kind of setback is putting pressure on you. So you can reach out. Then also reflect. Reflect fosters learning, looks at new perspectives and self-awareness. And also, if your plans are not working, when you reflect, you can find other ways of planning going forward. And then sometimes you just have to do a skill shift. So one of the biggest skill shift for me was to learn to reframe. I realized that, when these things got me negative, I would spiral into a negative way of dealing with it and get very angry, and it didn't help the rest of my day. So I worked on affirmations. I worked on ways of flipping the script, finding solutions rather than problems. And my mind changed over time. So that is quick 8 steps that you could use going through it. Another model is what I call a dual process model. And that's looking at the situation, but both from a life situation and your personal attributes. So when you're looking at your life situation, people usually from a life situation will say, look at the positives, look at the motivation. And when you look at personal, people tend to usually spiral into negativity, and that usually erodes. So if you're going to look at the positive, you're going to find engagement, you're going to find ways of doing things. But if you're going to look at the erosion and your personal negative way of doing things, you're going to focus on your stress reactions. You're going to focus on, am I coping, aren't I coping? And you're going to focus on things that are burning you out. Whereas with looking at the situation, incorporating, the work situation and ways of doing things differently, and incorporating other life situations that you've gone through, for example, like COVID, and picking on the positive stuff that could actually look at, how do I change my stress reactions? How do I change my coping? And how have I done things previously so that it doesn't lead into burnout? So with this model, sorry, I'm going a bit, I'm hoping this is the final slide. I'm hoping it doesn't go to the next slide. Yes, it does. Okay. So with this model, what it does is that it looks at bringing your personal and work situation, or how you actually understand your personal and your work situation, and look at strategies in both areas of those lives. So from a person or a personal perspective, you've had stress reactions before, you've had different ways of coping so that you don't go into burnout. So what are those individual-based strategies? From an organizational perspective, you've also had work situations that have had disruptions like COVID, lockdown, staying at home, hybrid working. How do we use those two to look at better coping so that we can get engagement in the workplace? So this overview of strategies will look at the individual strategies as well as the organizational strategies. And just to give you examples, you basically can look at, from an individual perspective, you identify things that you need to work on. So I need to monitor myself more regularly, catch myself in the act, so that my engagement is a little bit better. So primary prevention is, I wanted better time management, social skills training, and balancing work and private life. Secondary prevention is, I needed peer support to help me do that because I wasn't self-monitoring myself adequately. I needed coaching and consultation as well as career planning, so this doesn't affect me as per my goals. And the solution can be either of those. I'm just giving examples. An organization, you might need to say, oh, okay, it's affecting everybody. Maybe we need a stress audit. Maybe we need a psychosocial checkup to just check where we're at. The whole team is quite demoralized. Primary prevention could probably look at improving our job content or time scheduling, management of developing management on how to deal with this, corporate fitness programs to, get people's stress levels out. So maybe during the downtime, we have a quick yoga or something, maybe do emotional intelligence development so people are aware of how it affects them or how they affect each other. Also, secondary prevention could be anticipating socialization. Maybe we need to educate certain things, conflict management or organizational development. or the solution. But it can also be very practical, people. From an organizational perspective, some of the strategies that I work with certain companies could be the identification was that the rosters were not right. And primary prevention is reschedule all the rosters. Get people in when they can, or, so it can be very practical. I'm using wellness terms here because we're in a wellness space. Alternative options for load shedding that won't hurt your pocket. I think that also helped from a personal perspective, just brainstorming what helps. And these were some examples that I got from some of my talks. So some people told me about during load shedding, turn off your fridge and turn it into a cooler box. So when it's on, freeze ice packs and then put it in water-cooled containers, and then transfer things from the fridge during long power outages. Turn down the geyser. So that's quite a practical thing as well, and use a geyser blanket. All these things help. So you need some practical examples as well, not just the wellness examples that I gave. Replace older technology. So with the new LEDs, etc. And then also take showers and not baths. Because that saves electricity, not just water. So those are some practical examples that I got from these activities that I've done with clients. And I would do it with you, but we don't have enough time. So I am rushing through all of this. I'm hoping to see some chats or banter on the chat a bit later. 10 golden rules to prevent burnout, just in terms of an increased engagement, is you have to choose a healthy lifestyle. So again, even though load shedding is impacting on us and, we're struggling with even doing the meals on time or after hours and rushing for that, just maintain that if you're going to eat healthy, you're going to manage your stress levels. So look at other options of how do you still eat healthy? Lots of things on the reels on Facebook and all of that is showing how do you cook a healthy meal on a gas stove, that kind of thing. So look at options like that. Balance work, hobbies, and social life. Practice repurposing your time. Okay, so again, just for your mental health, you might need to, during that downtime, instead of ranting and raving, paint something or do something that would calm you down. Or take a walk outside. Define your own limits and set realistic goals. Be assertive and set boundaries on what you can and cannot do. So when there's no lights, it's difficult to actually set the boundaries. But everybody's in the same boat. Your customers as well as your suppliers and all of that, they're all in the same boat. So be assertive and say, listen, I can't do this, or I can do it. However, there's going to be a slight delay. So communication is key in those kind of situations. Invest in friendships, closeness, and intimacy, because that helps us create good hormones so that we can fight against this negative spiral when we are angry, frustrated, etc. Call on others and ask for their support. And that's where the good relationships come from, both in the workplace as well as personally. Use active ways of coping. So remember the passive and active that we spoke about. Monitor your psychological state, and positive thinking is important. And then also for opportunities and new challenges. I think we underestimate the positive thinking. And like I said, myself as well, I needed to go through reframing. So using the reflection constantly to say, oh, okay, how else can I think about this? It's, yes, things are bad. So we have to be authentic with ourselves. Things are bad, but how else can I find a silver lining or look at it differently? Just challenge yourself a little bit, and there will be silver linings. Okay. Other alternative options that came up with other talks with some of the clients that we spoke about. I remember somebody earlier said internet connectivity. So an example somebody gave me is a small UPS, uninterrupted power supply. They can keep your computer at least running and the internet running during load shedding. And there was an example given there. So I'm sure, Daniela, you will share this with the people online, hey, so that they
Yes,
can
this is
have a
being
look
shared.
at these things. Awesome. And then also just in terms of keeping the lights on, there's various opportunities out there. Just have a look on what's on sale, or solar power at least. One of the more important things is we talk about our resilience, personal resilience, and we always think about the resilience of the team. However, with load shedding, as well as all the other things that's happening in our country, I think we need to start talking organizational resilience. When we talk organizational resilience is referring to organizations that can actually anticipate, adapt, and recover from disruptions, challenges, or unexpected events that may impact on its operations, reputation, or viability. So these are organizations that's forward thinking, that looks at identifying things quickly, responding to risks and challenges. And you know what? The fact that you're sitting here shows that your organization has elements of that. How do we optimize this? How do we find ways of embedding this into our culture? Also looks at proactively building capacity, withstanding and recovering from crisis, and learning from them, and becoming even stronger and better equipped to face with future challenges. So these challenges that we are facing, even load shedding and COVID, had prepared us or given us some of the skills that we actually didn't think about. It was unconsciously preparing us or training us to deal with anything that comes our way. So although we think we don't have it, or we don't have the ability, these stretches have been grooming us to become more resilient as organizations. So why is organizational resilience important? Firstly, the benefits is increased agility, better risk management, and improved customer trust. But also the characteristics then is strong leadership, a supportive culture, and adaptable workforce. So when we look at that, we spoke about leadership, culture, agility, financial stability, and your workforce. So if we are working on developing our organizational resilience, these are the factors that we actually need to focus on. When we are looking at building resilience through leadership, we need to get leaders to set the tone of the organizational culture, but also provide clear communication, fostering innovation, and embracing change. So we usually think that embracing change is just one of the issues. Yes, it is important to discuss and embrace change and look at our resilience levels. But when we're going through difficulty, we look to the leaders in terms of how they are actually setting a role model, or how are they dealing with things. And, it does not mean that the role model needs to say that I'm coping, I'm fine. There's been lots of organizations where the leaders stood up and say, listen, I'm in the same boat. I really don't know what to do. I'm struggling myself, but let's get together and find solutions. And when they had that type of approach, because they provided clear communication, it allowed for fostering innovation. It allowed for us as the employees to come in and say, okay, maybe this is what we can do. And this can come from anyone, as long as the leader is willing to walk that road with them. It showed that everybody can actually come with solutions. So fostering a resilient culture means that leader actually created a culture of psychological safety. They basically looked at, you know what, I'm just as vulnerable as you, and I'm open to suggestions from everybody. And that created a level playing field, because we're all human beings and we all need to manage this together. And through collaboration and finding different ways, they're nurturing a growth mindset, coming up with different solutions. They actually promoted ways of doing things differently, and that brought in some learning and development. So it could mean that the managers for the organization that I'm thinking of had to go and learn about how to deal with the uncertainty. How do they firstly deal with it themselves, but how do they manage and navigate people through this uncertainty? And how do they promote learning and development for their employees? Because sometimes they needed new skills. So what can leaders do is rely on their learnings from COVID. They need to check in with their staff on how they are coping. They need to understand what realities they are experiencing, like traveling, or how are they getting there? Does it affect the fact that they're coming home, going home late, or coming in late? What resources are they needing to get them to cope with this load shedding? How can you as the leader or the organization help? And sometimes it's as simple as, I need to be a little bit more flexible. Other times it might need that they need to make another arrangement that they only come in 2 days a week to make up for it. It just depends on the workplace. Discuss departmental plans versus individual plans. Remember our models that we spoke about earlier. And when there is departmental plans, how does the individual plans fit in? Exercise flexibility as a leader. Manage on outputs, not the process. It's always important, because we can have the load shedding schedules, but being flexible to the outages might be needed sometimes. Also use time on load shedding in the office for face-to-face meetings, like I said earlier, or have online activities for well-being moments when you actually can do that, when people are working from home, so that the organization shows that their well-being, even though the frustration is sitting at home, is still important at that time. So I did go quite fast through this, but I just wanted some time for discussion and questions. So I'm not sure if I stop sharing and we can actually have a discussion. Is that possible?
So I think then maybe we should just open the floor as it stands now, with this still being shared, Roddy, if you wouldn't mind.
Okay.
While we are inserting questions into the chat box, just a reminder that if anybody was at all triggered by today's conversation, the Ask Nelson contact details, which Roddy is going to share now, are going to be up on your screen in a moment.
Is it not showing?
No, Roddy.
That's weird, because it's showing on my screen. Okay, let me stop sharing and then I will reshare. Sorry.
No trouble, no trouble.
No, it's not showing. That is so weird. Okay.
Received a couple of messages saying people have to pop off to their next meeting. If you do, thank you for joining us. Go well.
I'm not sure why it's not allowing me to share anymore.
Okay, I can share from my side.
I don't know if you can share from your side. That's so weird. Okay, I'm seeing some of the chat while we're waiting for that. Got some nice ideas. Okay, gas geysers. moving to the gas heater is one of the common ones. Yeah, now I understand why my skin is deteriorating and I have frequent heart palpitations, Kaelo. We underestimate how these things affect us, eh? Living on takeaways and not being able to enjoy quite the quiet time and relaxing time. That's definitely affected a lots of people, Fusi. But then it also then gives us other health issues that we are dealing with. Hi, Ruth. It's somebody I know. It's brilliant to see you. Other areas not being load shedded at all, and it's very frustrating. Yeah, yeah. Then we always have envy, hey? Lights envy. And it is a bit difficult. It doesn't help the frustration at that time. But like I said, we're going to have to reframe and look at what is in our power and what we can handle and manage our expectations on that. Impact on studies is definitely a common thing, Karshan. Your appliances, sure. Okay, there's lots of traffic jams and a whole lot. It's too cold. I don't know if there's any questions. I know people are really getting into the issues that affect them.
I must say the traffic one really gets me. I
Yeah.
find myself nowadays actually stopping at green robots because I'm so used to treating every robot as a four-way stop.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't actually think of that. I think sometimes we're so programmed at these times that it can affect how we actually function. And like you said, you almost do it automatically. And if you think about how it affects our brain, remember, it actually shuts our frontal cortex down. And you functioning in automatic mode, and we have to almost link it up again. And I've actually got a friend that does emotion aid, and she does a lot of grounding activities and all of that. And she I think it's Seligman that came up with that model where you look at your brain as your fist, and if you look at your fist, this part of your fist is actually your prefrontal cortex. So that's your higher order functions of your brain. And this is your hippocampus and your amygdala and brainstem and all of that. And when you're in trauma, what actually happens is this flips down and you only function on your basic aspects. So what counseling does is it starts unlocking this because you start processing things slowly. And it allows you then to function at that level. But because we're in automatic mode and we're constantly in stress and burnout mode, we don't give ourselves the opportunity to actually flip it open. So reflecting and doing that resilient exercises helps you to, without counseling, already start reframing things and getting your cortex, to get more functional. And then obviously counseling obviously takes you through that process. But it's quite interesting.
Yeah, and I wonder how many people don't even recognize that they're in that fight or flight mode.
Yes.
And find it as a normal living circumstance.
Yeah. And I think maybe then people need to do a self-reflection because you can either be stuck off and then it's depression and all the stuff that you're not functioning with from a prefrontal cortex perspective, or you can be flipped open and you're on anxiety, hypertension, all of those things. And you need to be aware of where you actually at because you can be stuck on or you can be stuck off. It's always good to just give somebody a call like us, Nelson, and just have a chat and see where you're at.
100%. Roddy, I think if there aren't any questions, I'm going to thank you so much for your time and knowledge and sharing your insights on the topic. I think a lot of people would have walked away with some really good ideas on how to better regulate themselves, get themselves out of that fight or flight mode. Thank you for teaching us some exercises on how to regulate your nervous system as well, both from a practical perspective with the geysers and UPS systems and whatnot, and mental perspective as well. So we're really, really grateful for your time and have loved having you here today. To everybody who attended, thank you so much. Look forward to hearing your feedback. If you've got any further questions, please feel free to contact myself. You can just respond to the emailer you received with the webinar link. And we will see you next week, or next month, second Tuesday of the month at 2 p.m. Have a wonderful June, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.